All I needed was one more brick, and then I bricked my entire score. We're replaying Glass Road right now on Pláyjà Vu.
Hi, this is Cheryl.
And Ryan from Knights Around a Table. So Pláyjà Vu is a concept where we have already played the game, and then we'll take little vertical slices of it and replay it for you from the meticulous notes that we've kept. But first, a little bit about the game. This is a game called Glass Road by Uwe Rosenberg, and it's a game where you take actions using cards and you're trying to build up your little piece of land. You own two fantastic factories, one that makes glass and one that makes brick, and your resources are tracked on these wheels. And something really interesting goes on with these wheels. So first I want to show you two fascinating mechanics that this game shows you that are I think are really, really cool. Let's start with the card play. We each have a deck of cards. Mine are the red ones, Cheryl's are the blue one, and let me see the cards that you've got, Cheryl. They are the exact same cards. So every single player starts with the exact same hand of cards, same 15 cards. And what you do is the game takes place over 4 different rounds, and everybody picks 5 of those cards to be in their hand. And then you just take turns picking cards, and the cards let you do stuff. Well, what do you want to do? You want to build these buildings onto your little board. Maybe you got to clear out some space. Maybe you need to cut down a forest or two, maybe you got to dig out a pond, and the buildings in the middle of the table let you score different amounts at the end of the game. But the interesting thing about the card play is that if you play a card and somebody else also has that card in their hand, you've effectively siphoned that card out of their hand. They have to play the card as well. Now, all of the cards have 2 different things on them that they can do. So the cultivator, for example, lets you build either a pond or a pit or a grove. And the second action is you get to buy a building and put it on your board. But if you play the card and one of your opponents has that same card in their hand of 5 that they chose, and you siphon that card out and they have to play it as well, each of you can only do one of those 2 things on the card. You don't get to do both. If you manage to choose a card and it's exclusive, you're the only person who plays that card to the table, then you get to do both things on the card. Pretty cool, right?
Yes.
I don't think I've seen that in any other game. Although it does remind me a little bit of Concordia, where everybody has sort of the same set of cards, except in Concordia, remember there's a whole row and you buy interesting additional cards to beef up your hand. There's no such thing as that in this game. It's just the same 15 cards. The second thing that we'll take a look at is how resources work. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to grab my brickworks and my glass building and put it just on the main camera for you here. This looks a little bit intimidating, I think, to start, and I think it freaked both of us out when we first looked at it, but let's demystify it a little bit. This wheel represents your glass making operation, and this wheel represents your brick making operation. This game takes place in the Middle Ages in the middle of the Bavarian forest, which is apparently rife with lots of nice quartz glass pits, so they can mine that, sorry, not quartz glass, quartz sand, so that you can make glass out of it, right? So, and you need brick in order to fuel your furnaces in order to get the sand hot enough to make glass. So thematically, that's what's going on here. Each resource is represented by a little disc. So this one's glass, there's quartz sand, some food, some charcoal, some water, and some wood. Down here in the brickworks, this one's brick, and then again there's another charcoal on here because you need, again, charcoal to fuel your furnaces to make those clay things into bricks. This is the clay that you need to make bricks, and here's the food that you need to feed to the bricks. No, to the workers who make the bricks. Right? You're oddly silent. So it's pretty easy to track. So you've got a little, the beam starts up the top on both of them, the glassworks and the brickworks, and here's a 0, which means you have 0 quartz sand and you have 0 charcoal. Well, look at this, you've got 1 food to start and 2 charcoal, 3 water, 4 wood. And then down here in the brickworks, you've got 0 brick and 0 charcoal, but you've got 1 clay and you've got 2 food. So that's pretty easy to track. And then if you play a card that gets you stuff, let's say you play a card that gets you 3 food, well, all you would do is take this and go 1, 2, 3 additional food. So you started with 2 over here at the beginning of the game, and you got 3, and now it says 5. So that's pretty easy. But the spooky thing is that these wheels turn. So what does that mean? Well, if you notice that there are 2 wedges on the wheels that are brown. This 3 glass over here and this 0 something over here. And then 3 brick over here and 0 something here. If at any time both of these brown wedges are completely empty, well, you have to turn the wheel. And let's look at what that looks like. Say off the top of the game, you played a card that got you 1 charcoal. And you decide, you can choose between your glassworks or your brickworks, but you decide, foolishly I might add, to take 1 charcoal in your brickworks. So you move 1 charcoal over to the 1 wedge. Aha, well look, the brown 3 wedge is empty and the brown 0 wedge is empty. So the game says you gotta move that wheel, ducka, 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 boom, and it's moved. Which now means that you've used all this food and this charcoal and this clay to build 1 brick. Look, now we have 1 brick. However, in moving the wheel, it's decreased by 1 every single other resource. So now you're down a food. Now you've got 0 charcoal and 0 clay. You think, well, I just got that charcoal. Why am I at 0 already? Well, because it got consumed in making that brick. Isn't that interesting? So I'm going to move it back to the way it was at the beginning of the game. Do another example up here. So let's say you get 1 quartz sand. Well, the game says, oh, actually you get 2 quartz sand, let's say, and you get 1 food, for example. Well, now the 0 wedge, the brown one, is empty, and the brown 3 wedge is empty. So the game forces you to turn that wheel, and now you've gone down a tick in all of these 5 resources. But after turning it, the brown 0 wedge and the brown 3 wedge are still empty. Well, you got to turn it again immediately. So now you're down 2 of everything, really, of these higher resources that you had more of. But you've made 2 glass. Ho, 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 ho. Now, that was a really crazy mechanic, and I didn't understand it at first. And try to get your head around it when you first start to play. Challenging?
Very challenging.
I had no idea what was going on. And as you'll see through our play, that misunderstanding kind of came back to bite me. So what we're going to do is we have our boards set up for the way they looked at the beginning of the game. That's my board right there. Let's take a look at Cheryl's board. It looks very much the same because there's a prescribed position of all the different forests and pits and groves and lakes. So everybody's board should look exactly the same. Everybody begins the game with the same 3 buildings. This one up here, it's pre-printed, gets you 1 point at the end of the game per glass that you have sitting in your glassworks. This one's the same thing except for brick, 1 point per brick. And then the building in the middle scores you half a point for every quartz sand that you have just sitting around on your glassworks. So that's the starting digs. Now what's random about the game is these buildings that are dealt out to the middle of the table. The costs are down the left-hand side. The points that they get you are on the top right side. And what they do for you, of course, are in the middle. And there's 3 different rows and 3 sort of different styles of buildings. These ones are all about, the purple ones are all about converting something into something else. These ones are just straight off 1 hits. You build them and you get the stuff on the tile, and that's all the building does for the rest of the time. And then these ones down here, see there's little asterisks on the points bags. These ones are meta-scoring opportunities. So depending on what you have going on your board, you might get extra points. You know, board games, you know how they work. That is the situation. So this is going to be randomly dealt. And what we haven't shown you on the table is I have just like modest short stacks of buildings here. Well, the game actually comes with a stack of buildings in each pile that's like that tall. Look at this, I'll turn it to the side. Huge pile of buildings. And Cheryl, like how many of these buildings did we get through when we played the game for the first time? 5 or 6 buildings, I think, all told, like very few, right?
Yeah.
So this is a game where it encourages repeat plays because you're definitely not going to get the same arrangement of buildings that you did the first time. And you're going to see tons of new buildings and tons of different configurations as you play. There's the teach. I think we're ready to rumble. Right, you ready? You got your cards? I chose to begin with these 5 cards. I chose the supplier, the fish farmer, the charcoal burner, the feudal lord, and the fuel collector. Now, this is secret. Cher, when we were playing, she wasn't allowed to see my face-up cards, but we're doing a little bit of strategizing here, so I'll explain why I chose the cards that I did. Most of these are resource cards. I looked at the fuel collector, and the fuel collector card gives you 1 charcoal per card in your hand. So obviously, the earlier you play the fuel collector, the more charcoal you get. So I thought, well, maybe that's a good one to get out as early as possible. The feudal lord is interesting because you get to draw 3 buildings, and those kind of go in like your private stash. Nobody else can build those buildings. These are just buildings that you alone can build. So of course, it makes sense, I think, that if we have common buildings out here that we're all racing to build, it's nice to have your own personal stash of buildings that you can only build from. Charcoal burner, I thought charcoal was going to be more important than it actually turned out to be, and then it wasn't, and then it got more important again. So we'll see how that works. The fish farmer gives you a couple of food and a food per pond, and the supplier just gets you 2 of anything and lets you build something. Those were my picks. Sure, what did you go for?
I went for the cultivator as the first one because I really wanted to place a pond or forest. And then you can also build something. And I thought, well, building must be important because it's just buildings.
That's the name of the game.
Then I chose the water carrier because I liked that it gave me a bunch of different resources. And I thought that sand was going to be more important than it turned out to be.
And you don't know the first time you play, right?
Well, and then you did see on your board you get a half a point per 1 sand, so I thought, well, maybe I'll need a lot of that at the end.
Yeah, makes sense.
The next one I ended up playing was the slash and burn farmer because I wanted to clear some land on my board and remove a forest so that I could place more stuff.
Now we should say the forests are stuck there. You can remove a grove or a pit or a pond at any time you want, but the forests, you need somebody like the slash and burn farmer in order to cut it down for you.
Right. And then I chose the pit worker because I wanted another pit.
Going all in on sand, just like I went all in on charcoal.
Yep.
Then your last one?
My last one was a carpenter.
Carpenter just gets you wood, lets you build a building.
Yeah.
Now, what we didn't mention is down here in this little penny, this little orange flag, this is what it actually costs to activate the person. So the cultivator doesn't cost anything, but the water carrier, you have to feed a food in order to use one of the 2 or both if you're the exclusive card player of that one. So that's how it works. Let's scoop them all up, and we'll actually go in the order that we played these cards and see how our strategies affected each other. Are you ready?
I am.
Who was first player?
I was.
You were, so you get the start player green chalice.
Sure.
All right.
So for my first card, I played the cultivator, which allows me to build a pit and a building.
Now, if I had the cultivator in my hand, I would have to play the cultivator to one of these 2 slots over here on the right side of my board. But as you saw, I don't have any cultivator, so Share is good to run off with that.
So I built a pit here, I believe.
Because you were the exclusive player of the cultivator, you get to do both things on the card in any order you want, by the way. Share could have built something first and then did the pit, but Share decided to put the pit first and then build something. So what did you actually build? Did you have enough money to do stuff?
So the pit's just free, and then I purchased the clay basin, which is a free building.
Right up here. Oh yeah, there's no price on it. You saw that and I didn't.
Yes.
Very good, very good.
Yeah, which I put here. And then because it's a purple building, I'm able to use this action whenever I want, but I decided to use it right away. So I then paid 1 water here, and then I paid 1 food from my brick wheel to get 3 of the clay. So 1, 2, 3.
All right, so for my card, I played the fuel collector. Do you have the fuel collector in your hand, Cheryl?
No, I do not.
No, great. So it's great. I have an exclusive player of the fuel collector, so that means I have to pay him a water, and I get a charcoal per card in my hand, and I get 2 wood. So pay the water. Down we go on the water. And I have 4 cards left in my hand, so I'm going to get 4 charcoal. I can get it either in my glassworks or my brickworks, and I decided to take it in my glassworks. 4, and I also get 2 wood. And I took those also in my glassworks. Why was I taking them in my glassworks? I have absolutely no idea, because I had never played the game before.
For my next turn, I played the water carrier.
I do not have the water carrier, so you're exclusive on that, which means you get to do both things on the card.
Yes, so I paid a food, and I paid it from my glass wheel, so this is going to go down. And the card gives me 4 water, 1 wood, and 1 sand. So I'm going to go up. 1, 2, 3, 4 on the water, 1 wood, 1 sand.
Great. For my next card, I played the Feudal Lord. Cheryl, do you have the Feudal Lord in your hand?
That's what I was missing. I thought I took the carpenter. I did not take the carpenter. I took the feudal lord.
You didn't take the feudal lord, did you?
I did.
She
I
took
had
the feudal lord. Oh, so if you play one that I played, your card has to go into one of those two slots at the side of your board. So let's see it. Prove to me that, there it is. Yeah, the feudal lord. So what this means is that if there was a cost requirement on the card on this banner, we would both have to pay it in order to take one of these two actions. But because neither of us played this card exclusively, we each have to pick either the top or the bottom action. Neither of us gets to do it twice. The feudal lord lets you draw 3 buildings, one from each of these categories. So the 3 buildings that I drew were the charcoal kiln, the fishery, and the mansion. Of these 3, I was particularly interested in the mansion. It's very expensive. It costs 2 wood, 2 glass, 2 clay, but look at this. It gets you 2 points per adjacent grove. So if I slammed it down right there, I would get 2, well, just 2, because look, they've arranged the boards very cleverly from the top of the game so that there aren't adjacent groves to, one thing. So what I would need to do is I would need to get rid of this one, get rid of this one, build one here, get rid of the pond, build a grove here, and build a grove here if I wanted to make good and get the 8 maximum points from the mansion. This was also the point of the game where I was kind of figuring out, I don't think scores are going to be huge in this game. Just looking at the kind of the number of points that all the buildings get, they're going to be minuscule scores. Am I wrong?
No, my first thought was scores would be about 15 points.
Yeah, something like that. So when we're looking at buildings like the ones that are pre-printed on your board, this one, 0.5 point per quartz sand, it's not going to be something like Ora et Labora, where the goal is to get 500 points or something. So those are the 3 buildings that I pulled from my feudal lord. So those are in my private collection, and I can build from them whenever I use a card that has a build action. What did you pull, Cheryl?
I pulled the potash manufacturer, the forest hut, and the estate, which I will move down so people can see.
Great. Now, of these, which one was the most interesting to you? Did you formulate a strategy based on these 3 buildings that you pulled?
I actually was really interested in the estate because it gave you 2 points per set of pit, grove, and pond. Mm-hmm. And I thought that I could probably make good on that. All
right, fair enough. Now is your turn. Which card did you play?
So I played the slash and burn farmer.
I did not have him in my hand, so you're safe. You get to do both things.
Yes. He allows me to remove a forest.
Oh, so that's the payment cost.
I took off this one.
Ah, chainsaw. No, it's Middle Ages. No chainsaws.
And he allows me to take 2 coal and 2 food. And I took it from the brick wheel. So 1, 2, and 1, 2. And then I had to move the needle.
Why did you have to move the needle again? Just to reinforce this rule?
Because both of these dark spots are empty.
Ah, okay. So you move it once.
It moves to catch up to...
Oh, now back it up. Why did you have to move it that far? I thought you just had to move it once. Oh, I see. When you moved it once, put it 1 tick, and now both of those spots are still empty. So you have to move it a second time, which effectively reduced your food by 2 and reduced your clay by 2.
Yes, correct.
Oh, but how many brick do you have now?
I now have 2 brick.
So that's not terrible, because we noticed that a lot of these buildings here, it costs brick and clay and wood to build things. So brick's not a bad material to have on hand when you want to build something.
Correct.
Okay, so for my next card, I played the fish farmer. Did you have the fish farmer in your hand, Cheryl?
I did not.
Oh, thank goodness. The fish farmer, since I'm exclusive, I get to pay him a charcoal from one of my 2 wheels, take 2 food, and then I get a food per pond on the board. Once again, I thought food was going to be a little bit more important than it actually turned out to be. But this is what I did. I took 2 food on each one of my wheels. Cheryl, what was your next card?
My next card was the pit worker, which is why I was pretty excited about the estate, because I already knew that I was going to be adding pits. So I put my pit here, and he gives me 4 sand, because I get a sand per
pit. And you also get a clay for the pit that you put down.
So my pit worker gives me 1 clay, which I'll use here, and gives me 4 sand. 1, 2, 3, 4 on my wheel.
Now, how many cards do you have left in your hand?
I have 0 cards left.
So this is kind of an interesting thing about the 2-player game. It's not quite the way the 3 and 4-player game works, but with the 2 players, you just keep going back and forth until one of you runs out of cards, which was kind of a bummer for me in that first round because Cheryl got through all 5 of her cards and I still had 2 of my cards left. So that can happen. And it's interesting because when we take a quick look at how round 2 went, we won't do every turn, but you'll see the opposite happened. I was able to play all of my cards and Cheryl only got 3 of hers out. So at the end of every single round, if there are empty spots on the building board, you have to fill them. And remember, these different color buildings go in these different color rows. So we flipped up the sand pit in that spot. We each pulled 5 cards from our hand of 15. So you get your choice back of all 15 cards. I chose these 5. Cheryl went and chose 5. And just like in the first round, I was the first player now. So that means I got the green chalice. I played a card, Cheryl played a card, I played a card, back and forth. And any time that I played a card that she had in her hand, she had to play it to one of those 2 slots at the side of her board. And any time that she played a card that I had in my hand, I had to do the same thing in my slots at the side of the board. And what's an interesting rule about this game is if your opponent plays a card that's in your hand, and the rule is you're forced to play it, if both of your slots are already full of cards that the opponent has siphoned out, you actually are not forced to play that card anymore. You're kind of like safe, which means that since you're not forced to play it, on the very next turn or a turn after that, you're able to play it and do both things on the card because now you know it's going to be completely exclusive. Your opponent has already used that card, at least in a 2-player game. So round 2 was a bumper round for me. I knew that I wanted to build that mansion at all costs. So I would need to play cards that would let me get some clay and let me get some materials. And I was constantly keeping in mind that that mansion had to be surrounded by groves. So I did a little bit more with the landscape people that let me build different groves on my board. And of course, the builder would let me build something twice. There were 2 buildings that I want to build, and I actually was able to snag them. These were the 2 buildings. Now, the buildings have either wood or brick on them. If they have brick on them, that means that they upgrade an existing building. So this artist's colony that I was able to build in round 2 has to go on top of the glassmaker's colony. And there's a little note on the tile. It's pretty hard to read, but it tells you which building it has to replace. So I was able to build the glassmaker's colony, which got me an extra glass. And with the resource cards I played, I was able to get more stuff in order to build that mansion. Do you remember when I got that from the feudal lord? I was able to put that on my board. And with the landscape guys, at any time you're allowed to take rip a pond off of your board or a grove or a pit, just not these big forest tiles. So I started, terraforming my landscape, ripping up ponds, ripping up pits, and putting down groves. So by the end of round 2, I was able to mostly surround that mansion with groves, and I thought I was in pretty good state. What did you do in round 2, Cheryl?
So in round 2, I really wanted to build that estate that I got from the feudal lord, this one right up here. I wanted more food because my food was too low, so I ended up taking, or I thought it was too low. I ended up taking these cards right here.
Let's see if there are any repeats. Look, the forest manager was a repeat, so I pulled that out of your hand.
You did, and I was upset about that because I wanted the food, and I also wanted to put a forest down, and what I ended up doing, because you pulled the forest manager, was I only took the food.
Oh, so you didn't get to put the forest down.
That was kind of a bummer.
Because you were trying to collect sets of landscapes, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I was working towards the estate even though I haven't built it yet.
That's interesting strategy. So we both chose the builder, and we both chose the forest manager was the other duplicate. So the way it worked out was that I was able to play all 5 of my cards, and you were only playing 3 of your cards, and 2 of yours went unused, just like it was the reverse of what happened in round 1. That's what we looked like at the end of round 2. So what happened in round 3 briefly, for me anyway, was that this building came available, the coal facility. It cost brick. So I knew I needed to get brick somehow. And remember, the way that works is that this was the situation, and it wasn't. This is the end of round 3, not the beginning. But if I wanted brick right now, I would just need to do something to take a food, and then because the 0 and the 3 are empty, that would move my bar, and now bam, I have 1 brick. So I was in a state where I needed to do that. I needed to move one of those resources up in order to have the whole wheel turn, in order to get brick, in order to buy this coal facility. And this is what I find this designer does in his games a whole lot. It's like, I gotta do this, But in order to do that, I just got to do this. Oh shoot, but in order to do that, I got to do this, this, and this, right? So then it maps out this whole labyrinthine, you know, push pins and red string on a big cork board in order to figure out what you need to do for the next few turns. And you get down to a point where if the opponent, I can find this in Agricola by the same designer, you've got it all mapped out like that, and then if your opponent just takes that one spot that you need, it's like a domino effect, and your whole strategy, like a house of cards, just comes falling down. I've used about 5 different analogies from games in that whole sentence, but I wanted to build this coal facility. It gives you points for the coal on the wheel with the least coal. So of course what you want to do is get both coals up to 7 on both wheels, and then you get 7 points for the building. That seemed pretty good to me, but I had to construct that spider web of cards. So I played this, let's see, the forest manager, because I was still trying to surround my mansion with groves. I wanted to play the clay worker to get enough clay in order to build that building. I needed 3 clay for the coal facility, but then I noticed that he takes water and I had no water. So that means I had to play the pond builder in order to get the water to give to the clay worker to get the clay that I needed. I also needed space to put the thing, so I needed to clear out one of my forests using the slash and burn farmer guy, and I needed somebody who could build a building. So that's what the supplier was all about, and I thought I could pick up, if I was the exclusive player of the supplier, I could pick up whatever resources I needed and build that building. And I actually did manage to do it. It all came to fruition. I was able to clear off the forest with Slash and Burn Farmer and put the coal facility down on my board. So I had everything mapped out nicely for what was going to happen in round 4. So you were the first player, Cheryl. What was the first card you played?
I played the Carpenter.
You played the Carpenter. I didn't have the Carpenter, as we know, so you did your stuff. And then I played the Pond Builder because I needed that water. Uh-oh. You had the pond builder too. So that went into the slot at the side of the board, and we each only got to do one thing on the pond builder's card. Now, interestingly, in this game, you actually wouldn't have to do the thing. You can play a card just because you think you're blocking someone. And then if you don't have the price to pay the person, you can just, skip their thing. I think that this is such a tight game that might not be a great strategy, just playing a card just to block. In a lot of these games that I play, playing just to block usually hurts you more than it hurts others. But that's what went on. So now you had the next card.
And the next card I had was the Slash and Burn Farmer.
I also had the Slash and Burn Farmer. So the Slash and Burn Farmer has to go into this little 2-slot holding cell over here. So we each got to do one thing, right? We removed a forest. And then I played the Clay Worker. And you had the Clay Worker in your hand. So it would go into one of those slots. However, check this out. Cheryl already has both slots blocked. So where normally I would siphon that card out of her hand and she would be forced to play it, because she has both slots occupied, she doesn't have to play that card at all. Which means that since it's exclusive to the table, I get to do both things on the Clay Worker card. And if Cheryl wanted to play the Clay Worker card in a later turn, she would get to do both things on the card because it would still be exclusive. It wouldn't match any other card that had been played in that turn. So this is interesting. You could have played the Clay Worker right away, right after that, and you would have got to do both things. You decided not to. What did you play instead?
The Cultivator.
The Cultivator. So that's playing into your whole plan of getting different landscapes out so that you could meet that matching criterion on one of your cards. And then it was my turn. I played the Supplier so that I could get some supplies, which also gives you supplies and build something. And then you played what?
The Clay Worker.
The Clay Worker. So you did manage to get it because I didn't run out of cards. I think that was pretty well played on your part. So I got to play 1, 2, 3, 4 cards. You got to play all 5 cards. And what did you accomplish over there on your board in round 3? The penultimate one.
I was able to clear some more forests, and I got the colonization house, which allows me to clear more forests for coal, which I wanted to do in the next phase. It's important to me so that I could put more groves and ponds down and cash in on the estate.
And so now, here we're going to take each turn individually in round 4 so you can see what the climax of this game looked like. So here we are, round 4 of Glass Road. And if I knew one thing, it's that it was mission critical for me to get my charcoal levels up to the max in each wheel so that I could get 7 big points. And I knew that I needed to build one more grove here so that I could get 8 points for my mansion. And that would be, that's pretty good. And these are kind of like bonuses, right? If you can get brick, you get a point per brick. If you can get your wheels situated so you get glass, you can get 1 point per glass. And look, already here, I'm in a position where as soon as I take food, food, that wheel's going to move and give me bricks. So I'm feeling pretty good. So these are the cards that I chose going into the final round. First and foremost, the fuel collector, because that gives you 1 charcoal per every card in your hand, and I need as much charcoal as I can get. The charcoal burner as well, since I'm going all in on a charcoal strategy, makes sense. Forest manager was going to be the guy who could get me that 4th grove to surround my mansion. And then I thought clay worker, just to get some resources, and the supplier so that I could, build something. And the thing that I had my eye on over here was this coal storage building. Look, it costs clay and it gets you 1 point per 3 charcoal. So I thought, wow, that's a good synergy. That building plays into my whole charcoal strategy, but I'm gonna need clay to do it, which is why I put the clay worker in my hand. Cheryl, which 5 cards did you grab at the end, in the final days of Glass Road?
I grabbed the forest manager.
Yes.
Because I want to build more groves for my strategy. The cultivator, again, plays into my strategy. Fish farmer, I can't remember.
Why?
I think it was low on food.
Did somebody cost a food? Is that why?
I remember why.
Well, flip out the other two.
I think this was the one. There was one I was like, I pulled it and I shouldn't have.
That was the mistake?
It was the mistake.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was not happy with it.
Well, it was our first play, right? So who knows?
Yeah.
What else did you get?
I pulled the woodcutter to get more wood and get rid of my forest so I can make more land. And then the fuel collector, again, more wood, and I wanted some more coal. My coal was low. Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
So we can already suspect.
To feed him, I think I needed
feed the fish farmer. Yeah, you did need coal to somehow he eats coal. I don't know what the deal is.
Yeah, it's a bit strange. But then I just want to say, so I was very excited because I think you hadn't clued into a particular building here,
which one?
Was this district office.
No, I don't think we've explained these very well. In the 3rd round, I was upset because I figured out kind of how this game worked, and I think you figured it out earlier than I did. The way that these buildings work, there are 2 things that you can do at any point in the game, even when it's not your turn. Those 2 things are pluck off one of these landscapes like we talked about. The forest has to stay there. You need a card. But you can get rid of a pond, for example, at any time. The other thing you can do at any point is you can fire off these purple buildings to do these exchanges as much as you want. So this isn't 1 time 1 food for 2 sand. This is like at any point in the game, spend as much, water, not food, spend as much water as you want for 2 glass, like 1,000,000 times. You have like 7 water, boom, 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 boom. You do that 7 times and you get a whole pile. Well, you would get 14 glass, which you can't hold in your wheel because your wheels, as you can see, only go up to 7 in each resource. But the point is you can do that as much as you want. So the building you wanted
was the district office because I was still working towards my strategy with the estate to get points for the collection. And this allows me to remove 2 buildings from my private supply, which I got from the feudal lord at the first round.
That's right.
So I built the estate, which was one of the 3, and then I had 2 left over, and I was like, great, I'm going to ditch those, and I can place another forester.
So you're able to play like essentially 3 cards that did landscape stuff for you, when really there's only 2 in those 15 that do it. Smart.
So I was super excited about that.
Let's see how it actually works, because something interesting happened midway through round 4. So the first card that I played out of my hand was the Forest Manager, because I wanted to get that 4th forest next to my mansion and score max points. Did you have the Forest Manager?
Yes, and you knew I wanted that.
Yes, I knew that Cheryl was going to play as many landscape cards as she could. So that card has to go in your little slot next to your board into Specialist Prison. So we each got to do 1 thing. So of course the thing that you did was the top one, right? You cleared off something, or no, you just put down a grove on your board.
I did.
So where did you put down the grove?
I believe I put it here, yes.
So, of course, what I did with the Forest Manager was, at my option, I could get rid of that pond, and I put down the 4th grove that I needed to make good on that mansion, and I took a wood. So, what was your first card for your turn?
My first card was the Cultivator.
The Cultivator, and I did not have the Cultivator in my hand. So, what did the Cultivator allow you to do? That's another landscape one, right?
So what I ended up doing was, because you can use purple buildings at any time, I blitzed this forest because I needed to make room, because I also wanted to put down a building. Because before that I only had the 1 space free. In blitzing that forest, it gave me a coal.
Now we should say that one of the rules is if one of these guys gets you 2 of something, you're not allowed to split that up between your 2 wheels. But if somebody like the clay worker or this charcoal burner gets you 3 of something, you're able to pick which wheel the 3 goes on. So you couldn't go 2 charcoal on one wheel and 1 on another, but you could go 3 on one, and if you get to do both actions, 3 on another, or the same. That depends.
So after I used my colonization house, I used the cultivator action to build a pond. I also bought a building. So I put the pond here, I believe, and then I took the district office right here.
The one you had your eyes on.
Yeah, and the district office cost me 1 wood and 1 glass, so I went down in those. This was an epic turn. This allows me to remove 2 buildings from my private offer, which I did, which these 2 right here, in order to place a grove, I believe, yes. Right there. And then suddenly I had...
How many sets is that?
4 sets.
4 sets, so that's 2 points per set. So at that point, Cheryl had basically, in a 2-player game, you know how it goes, you get a point, if they get a point, well, you might as well not have gotten that point, right? So it kind of like negates any points you got. Now Cheryl had 4 sets, and over here in Mansionland, I was so proud of myself for surrounding my mansion, because I got 2, 4, 6, 8. Well, she's got 8 points with her set collecting thing, so now those scores even each other out, so I have to find another way to edge her out. So I played the charcoal burner, which I had to feed a wood, and then I would get 3 charcoal, so I could pump it up on both wheels. Did you have the charcoal burner in your hand?
I did not.
Good, so I got to do it twice. Thank goodness. So both of these. So I took that wood that I had gained from the forest manager off my glassworks, and then I was able to go blomp, 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 pump that up 3, blomp, blomp, blomp. So now the wheel with the fewest number of charcoal on it was this brickworks down here, 6 versus 7. So already I'm good for 6 points. So I was feeling pretty happy about that. Cheryl, what was your next card?
So my next card was the fish farmer. I paid a coal, which was from glass, and I got 6 food, which I used up here. That pushed the needle up, which meant I had a brick.
And a brick is worth a point at the end of the game.
That's right.
Or you could use it to build buildings, though that seems a little bit risky at this point, depending on the building you're going for, right?
Correct.
Now, it was imperative to me that I was able to jack up this last charcoal here, because then instead of getting 6 points, I would get 7 points. But I also, in order to make good on this, I wanted to desperately to buy this coal storage, which gets me a point per 3 charcoal, no matter which wheel it's on. I had 2 cards that were extremely important to me, and it was extremely important that I would get to do both actions on both cards, which meant that if Cheryl had either of these cards in her hand when I played one or the other of them, and I didn't get to do both things on both cards, my entire strategy would be torpedoed. I wouldn't get all the charcoal that I needed from the fuel collector, and I wouldn't get the clay that I needed to be able to buy this coal storage and be able to make good on all this coal that I was picking up. So I didn't know which one to play, and the fuel collector is better when you play it earlier. I only needed 1 charcoal, but the earlier you play it, you get 1 charcoal per card in your hand. So better earlier, but I think more crucial to me now in order to get the clay worker just to build that building, to make good on some of the charcoal that I've collected. So for this turn, this do or die turn, I chose the clay worker. Cheryl, did you have the clay worker in your hand?
I did not.
You did not. Yes, I got to do both things. I picked right.
But interestingly,
yes,
I did have the fuel collector.
We'll get there, and we knew that from the top of the round. But here we go. Boom, 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 boom. All the way to the top on clay. So now I can afford that building. All right, over to you, Cheryl. What was your next card?
The fuel collector.
Haha, and as we know, I have the fuel collector, so that drew the card out of my hand. I had to put it in card prison, which means that both of us only got to do one thing. That's okay. I only need that 1 charcoal in order to go bloop like this, and now I've got 7 on both. No problem. I knew I was safe. Cheryl, you wanted to do both of those things, of course. Which one did you pick, though?
What I ended up doing was dumping my water down to pay for the fuel collector.
Right, of course, I did the same thing.
What I ended up doing was taking the coal per card in my hand, and I only have 1 card left. So I added the coal, which moves the needle and gives me 2 brick.
How many cards do you have left?
1.
And I've got 1, so that means if I play this, that ends the round and the game, right? The 4th round. And if Cheryl's card is the same as my card, then at least she gets to do 1 thing, and I'm limited to 1 thing on this card. So the card that I played for the final turn, possibly in this game, no, definitely the final turn.
Definitely.
But maybe like the last thing that I get to do, maybe the last thing you get to do, was the supplier, and your last card was which one?
It was the woodcutter.
Right, so you didn't get to play that card, right?
I didn't need to. It was fine anyway.
So I just got to play the supplier, fine. So I get to do both things on the supplier. So here's what happened over in Rhineland. I took 2 food. See if you can see this coming, which moved my bar like this, do-do-do-do, and then I got to buy the coal storage because the supplier, oh, and taking that 2 food, by the way, gives Cheryl a food. So she gets to take that food. Let's see that, Cheryl. So over here, because of his purchase capability, I was able to buy that precious coal storage building. And in Rhineland, it goes right next to my other coal facility building. So what did you say you forgot to do?
During my fish farmer turn, I used my colonization house here to clear this forest, which gives me an extra coal, which when I move that up, turns
clears
the
out those
wheel
2.
and gives me 3 brick.
Now we were ready to score. So the way that you score is really, really simple. All that you do is you rip through all your buildings and you count up the points for the face values, and then you go back through all the ones that have these little asterisks on them and you count up the meta points. For face value on buildings, Ryan had 1 point and Cheryl had 5 big points from her board. But that's not where the big points were. The big points were in the metascoring buildings. And in the metascoring buildings, for all those sets of landscape tiles, you scored 17 points, which is an odd number, so mathematically that doesn't work out. But you scored extra points for the brick that you were holding onto, right?
I had 3 points from the sand, because it's half a point.
Right. And then you had 3 points from the brick.
And then 3 from the sediment factory.
So that all equaled 17 points for Cheryl. Then over in Rhineland, I got full 8 points for the mansion. I got 3 points per coal. So of course I had 7 coal and 7 coal. So it's 14 divided by 3 is 4, rounding down. And then for the coal facility, I got 1 point per coal on my lowest coal wheel. And so since they were both at 7, I got 7 points for that, which equals 22 points per person. Wait, why are you shouting at your computer screen? Did I do something wrong? Oh my God. What I didn't realize, I thought it was a complete tie game and we both did so well, but what I didn't notice was when I took the 2 food, that moved the bar up, and in moving the bar up, that diminished the amount of coal I had, and so I got points for the coal on the smallest wheel, so I did not, in fact, score 22 points. I scored 20 points because I lost those 2 points of the coal! Ah! So I did not, in fact, win. Cheryl bested me 22 points to 20. So close, if not for the stupid brick. Because I went down 2 points in this coal learning, but up 2 points in the brick, so it all canceled each other out. Well, that's how everything shook out, and now the final word. Cheryl, if you were to play Glass Road over again, what do you think you'd do differently?
I think initially I was pretty scared to play around with this wheel over here.
It's daunting.
It took a little bit for my brain to really get it, but I think don't be scared and just drop some stuff so that you can get your glass, get your brick earlier, and then that would enable you to buy a lot more of these buildings over here. Like a lot of them require brick or glass, and they're great, so...
And I think that's one thing that I didn't cotton onto very early is that obviously, the building materials are brick, clay, wood, glass. And I thought, I'm going to build my empire out of charcoal and we'll create entire buildings out of soot and dust and ash. And I will be the lord of the soot fields. It doesn't happen that way. So I think I focused on the wrong materials.
I did too, though. I focused on sand, so...
Yeah, that's right. You thought sand was going to be super important.
And then I was like, no.
It would for certain strategies, because that was another thing you said, wasn't it? That one key thing is to identify synergies among the buildings that get dealt out to the main board. right?
Yes.
But that's risky, right? Because that is a public board, so anybody can build those buildings. So if you develop like a perfect pathway through like, oh, I'll get this, I'll build that, and then just like I said with other Rosenberg games, if somebody throws a wrench in your gear by buying the one thing that your whole house was built on, the whole thing, that's the linchpin, it all comes tumbling down and you're toast. One thing that I wanted to know before I started the game was how tight it was. It's immensely tight, and how small the scores were. I felt really bad when I was like hinging my entire strategy around building this one building with 4 grows around it. I thought, well, yeah, and then what? Like, what are you going to do for an encore? But really, when we just came down with a 22-20 score, 8 points is significant, right?
Yeah,
it's really something. The other mistake I think I made was, and he even says it in the rule book, these purple buildings where you can do these exchanges at any time, all you want, you just kind of like get a sense as you're playing of how tight your turn's on and how few things you get to do. And if other players have the cards that you're trying to play, it diminishes even those things that you expected to be able to do. But if you've got those purple buildings, man, at any point, it doesn't even have to be your turn. You can just start, cranking out these exchanges. So I think if I play again, I want to focus more on getting those purple buildings. I think they're crucial.
Yeah, they're very powerful.
This middle row, I don't like. I don't like this one off. I used it once, but I don't like, you spend a whole bunch of money in order to just one time get a thing, and then it takes up room on your board. So unless there was another meta-scoring building that's like, you get points for having this building adjacent to other buildings or something, I didn't have a lot of use for this row.
I didn't buy any from that row, I don't think.
I just did one. I just did one of this artist's colony that just got me 1 glass once. But of course, it's kind of expensive depending on where you are on the wheels to get your glass factory to build glass.
Sorry, I bought 1 to get me bricks.
Which one? Show us.
The storage.
Oh, yeah.
Top here.
Yeah, that's right. Which you put to good use, I would say.
Yeah.
And you did win.
Yeah.
Maybe a more important question. Would you play Glass Road again?
My initial thoughts were it wouldn't be something that would come off the shelf right away, but...
What would come up on the shelf before this? Like, what would you grab before Glass Road?
Usually something heavier, honestly, like Feast for Odin.
Right. And we have been playing games like that where we'll put them on... We have a table set up in our living room now, and we'll put it up and do like 2 rounds and then go to bed. And then 3 days later, we'll play another round and then go to bed. So something like Feast for Odin, which is by the same designer, we have to stretch over multiple weeks sometimes to get a game through. Sometimes. And then who messes that plan up? The cats.
Pippin.
Pippin the cat likes to jump on board game tables and finds board game pieces extremely fun when they clink and land on the ground. So
he picks them up and then carries them around for a little bit.
So some of the techniques that we've decided on for deterring the cats include we've covered things with like Tupperware container lids and things. Yes, so we've done that. The box lids. And then if he bats the box lids around, it pushes all our stuff around. We've had to take pictures in between rounds. And then your whole foil trick.
Yes.
So cats don't like landing on tin foil, right? So Cheryl's like, oh, all we gotta do is like stretch.
Cover the entire table.
Just multiple sheets of tin foil. Of course, the tin foil's moving the pieces around. The cats don't go on it, but it's the most unwieldy solution. If anybody has a good solution, other than being mean to the cats, of how to get the cats off your board game table, we're all ears. Let us know down in the comments. Would I play it again? You know what? I'm really eager to see what the rest of these buildings look like. As I mentioned, there's this huge stack that you can dig through for each pile of buildings, and it's more the way that the buildings come out on the board. And I think that I would use that Feudal Lord card more than once just to get a really nice selection of stuff. You say that, and then you go play it, it's really tight, and you can't do it.
It's 4 rounds.
It is only 4 rounds.
So, I don't know. I thought about using it again, and I was like, I didn't really like... I only liked one of the 3, so it's a waste of a turn, really.
You say that even though you did have the building that you could use multiple times in order to get rid of private buildings to do what? To build more landscape tiles.
But I got that last round.
And you only have so many spaces on your board. Man, yeah, it's a tricky one. I think what we both agreed on was that it plays so quickly. It's only 4 rounds, especially at the 2-player count. It goes so zippy that it's a great weeknight game. But that's right, if we were both wanting something really substantial and meaty to play, we'd reach for something probably more substantial and meaty, like A Feast for Odin by the same designer. So, Cheryl, Glass Road in a single word?
Challenging. Your word?
Opaque. Well, that was Pláyjà Vu for Glass Road. Thanks very much for watching this episode, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Did you just watch that whole thing? Oh, hey, to 100% this video, click the badge to subscribe and then click the bell to get notifications when I've got new stuff.